How to Argue Like a Lawyer, Part 1. Rule number 1, keep it short. The longer of a question you give, the longer of an answer you're going to receive that doesn't even answer your question at all. That's why sometimes if you text a boyfriend or a girlfriend or a spouse and you're making a big long question trying to make a point, and then they only answer like one little thing in there, and then they're like, hey, I answered your question, but they really didn't. It's because it was too long. You gave them just like a golden corral buffet of what to pick and choose to answer. So if you want a response, keep the question short. Usually just one fact per question. Sound good? Rule number 2, keep the emotion out of it. The more emotion you put into the argument, the more angry you're going to get. It looks like you're overcompensating. Makes your actual argument, the logic of it, look weaker. And rule number 3, keep the cursing out of it. Do you get style points? Yeah, you do. But it's like over salt and peppering your food. It just means that the food wasn't that great to begin with, and neither was your argument. Follow me. How to Argue Like a Lawyer, Part 2. Rule number 1, be the first to gain the high ground. And here's a trick to do that. Use the phrase, well, we can agree that, or it's fair to say that, before making your point. It puts the other person in the position of thinking, well, I don't want to be unreasonable. 9 times out of 10, they'll agree with you. Number 2, don't take the bait. Don't do it. To win an argument, you need to go from A to B in a direct line. Now, the other person, more than likely, is going to try and splinter it 1,000 different ways, bring up stuff that happened in the past, stuff that has nothing to do with the argument. It means that they're losing. So, if you want to win, A to B, direct line. And 3, control the conversation. You do that by controlling the pace of the conversation. Be comfortable with silence. Don't have a rapid-fire response every single time. Take 5 seconds, 10 seconds. Look at their shoulder, behind them. Act like you're really thinking about the answer. It makes you look way more in control. Follow me. How to Argue Like a Lawyer, Part 3. Now, the key takeaway here is find the issue. What I didn't say is go into attack mode. I said find the issue. And 99.9% of the time, what is spoken is rarely the true issue. It's only a symptom of it. For example, it's not so much that you forgot to bring that dirty dish to the sink, it's that she's tired, she's overwhelmed, she wants to feel like she has a partner in this, and she feels underappreciated. You can apply this to any situation, whether it's at home or at work, but what you are hearing is not what you are getting underneath. It's just the tip of the iceberg. Now, how do you find the issue? Number 1, be quiet. Number 2, listen. Number 3, ask why. They'll give you an answer, ask why. They'll give you another answer, ask why. Why is that? How so? Explain that to me differently. The worst thing you can do is act like their feelings are not justified. You solve that issue, you can solve everything else. How to Argue Like a Lawyer, Part 4. Number 1, resist the urge to get defensive. It's very hard to do because it's very natural. It's an impulse that we have, but as soon as you get defensive, you are telling the other person that they are on the right track because it makes you look more guilty. So the harder you push, the more defensive you get, you're already losing. Number 2, don't get personal. As soon as you start throwing any personal jab in there, you've lost. Because now you're telling the other person that your argument is so weak, you have to resort to low-hanging personal jabs to get your point across. It's a no-go. And number 3, acknowledge what they said. It does not matter whether you agree with it or not. Just acknowledge that they said something to make them feel heard. Otherwise, you're never going to get them to your side of the court. They're not going to listen to you. They're only going to care about what's happening on their side. Follow me. How to Argue Like a Lawyer, Part 5. Now, you'll also want to know how to calm down an argument. Rule number 1, don't tell them to calm down. Instead, lower the pitch of your voice. Hey, I get it. I understand. I hear you. If they're cruising at 100 miles per hour, take them down to the school zone. And without even thinking about it, I bet you they're going to lower their voice too. And then you can really start talking. Number 2, summarize their points and repeat it back to them. I hear you saying this. I'm taking from this conversation this. If you're right, they'll say yes. If you're wrong, they'll let you know. It doesn't matter whether you agree with it or believe it or not, but they need to feel heard. So summarize their key points, repeat it back to them. And number 3, don't use always and never, because what you've done is just splinter the argument into more arguments about whether or not they always or never do something. So cut that out. Follow me. So a little tip here is to know the difference between open-ended questions and closed-ended questions. Open-ended questions are ones that usually start with how, what, when, where, why, how are you, what did you do next, when did you arrive, questions that don't assume the answer, versus closed-ended questions, or what they call leading questions, they already assume the answer. For example, an open-ended question would be, what did you see when you walked in the room? A closed-ended question would be, when you walked in the room, you saw 3 people sitting at a table. open-ended question would be, what time did you arrive to the store? A closed-ended question would be, you arrived at 6 p.m. You lead them to the answer that you want. That's how attorneys most of the time in cross-examination lead you to an answer and can box you in. Leading questions usually want you to just have a simple yes or no to the question, or an I don't know, which we can talk about later. But open-ended versus closed-ended questions, it's good to know. The number one way to not be defensive, don't interrupt. Don't do it. Because once you interrupt, what you are telling the other person is what you have to say is far more important than what they have to say. So go ahead and sit this one out and listen to me. It's going to make everything worse. Let them get it all out. How could you possibly pour new thoughts into a glass that's already full? Because just like you, that person is human, and for the last minute or hour or day, they've been thinking in their head of all the things they want to say to you. So let them pour it all out. And just when you think that they're done, you can ask anything else, and they'll either have something else or they'll be done. And then you can address the point. Additionally, don't give the yeah, but, or and but, or okay, but. There's no but. It's just okay. I hear you. I understand. And then you can address the point. Yeah? Try that. Follow me.